That is 6 out of a possible 6 on the West Coast road trip, and the Sceptres win 2-1 against the Vancouver Golden Knights. This was a very funny game to watch, almost. These are two teams that are near the bottom of the standings. These are two teams that have the worst and second worst power play in the league. Like, it's a lot. These are two teams that have the worst and second worst goals for per game in the league, if I'm not mistaken, going into this one. So, like, not really two powerhouses matching up against each other here. But, the last time Toronto was in Vancouver was the last game before going into the Olympics, and Toronto lost 5-0. And Vancouver really liked that one to the point where they put up an Instagram post that night of all the players they took from Toronto in the expansion draft and said, "Look better in Pacific blue anyway." And I don't think Toronto liked that very much. But this was a game about depth for Toronto. This was a game about unsung heroes. This was stepping up. Toronto has Lauren Messier in the lineup for this game and the last because Emma Gentry is out with an injury. Daryl Watts wasn't in this game. She's still dealing with whatever illness took her out in the third period against Seattle. Not really 100% healthy lineup here for Toronto, and they started Kirk again this game, which I was kind of surprised about. I thought for sure Julie would get the nod with how close the games are together, but no, they sent Kirk back in, and not a bad decision. She played great. I want to start looking at this game by looking at some of the comments that were said in the post-game press after last game. The first, 2 or 3 questions asked in the post-game press was Emma Malte saying, "Yeah, we did not play our best. That was not our best game. Nice to get away with the win, but it wasn't our best game. We need to be better. We need to do a few things cleaner," and so on and so forth. And Troy Ryan said much the same thing, where they need to tighten up defensively, they need to, lock stuff down, and the biggest thing was they need to treat every game going forward like it's a playoff game. Which is really good because they're not currently in the playoffs. Like, they really are in a bit of survival mode. Yes, they're in the mix pretty much in terms of a lot of points, but they've played more games than any other team. Like, every single other team that could potentially lock them out of the playoffs or leapfrog them have more games to do so. They have more opportunities to get those points. So Toronto has a lot of ground to make up and on a tighter timeline than anyone else in the league. Having those comments said really showed in this game. I think defensively, a lot of the time Toronto was a much tighter team than they have been earlier in the season. They were keeping Vancouver to the outside a lot. They were really forcing them to just get those perimeter shots off. Vancouver did have more shots, but it was a lot from the outside and a lot that Kirk could see pretty clearly. But getting into the game, started off pretty feisty from both teams. Like I said, they're teams that are low in the standings. They want it bad. Not even 5 minutes in, Sarah Nurse took a holding penalty, which gave Toronto power play. Now, Toronto power play is comically bad, so they didn't really get anything going on the actual power play itself, but it did give them a bit of momentum and gave them a bit more possession, a bit more time in Vancouver's zone, if nothing else. Only 20-25 seconds after that power play was over, Toronto was able to work it into Vancouver's zone, and Claire Dalton threw it out from the corner to Sarah Jalmerson, who's right in the slot, nobody covering her, and just rips one past Mashmeyer's blocker. Beautiful play. Excellent play. What we've been saying that Toronto's been needing to do all season is get in close to the net, get players in front of the net, in front of the goalie, and they do just that. Bang, bang, early lead. Perfect. Glorious. Sarah Jalmerson's second goal of the season. 2 goals in 2 games from a player that hasn't scored for the first half of the season is great to see, and I hope she can continue. I hope she can, stay hot. Not even a full minute later, very similar play, to be honest. The puck gets rung around the boards. Dalton picks it up on the other wall, this time from the half wall, throws it in front to a wide open Lauren Messier, who puts it past Mashmeyer. Like, basically mirror images of the exact same goal. Claire Dalton had an incredible game. She had a great night. She might not have actually gotten a goal, but she was playing so well today. And, this is Lauren Messier. This is only her 4th game played because she's on her second 10-day standard player agreement with Gentry out. Just a great shot. Beautiful pass from Dalton. Great shot from Messier. And Toronto, just like that, 8 minutes into the game, they're up 2-0. Fantabulous. The rest of the period, very back and forth. The rest of the game, very back and forth, to be honest. It was a very even, very balanced game. Toronto would go into the first intermission, up 2-0. In the second period, 4.5 minutes into the second period, Natalie Spooner took a slashing call, which gave Vancouver a power play, but Vancouver's power play isn't really anything to write home about, just like Toronto's. And Toronto actually got a pretty decent shorthanded opportunity here for a jailbreak, and Mashmeyer made an incredible save on a 2-on-1 from a pass over to Renata Faust, who just couldn't get it through Mashmeyer's pad. Mashmeyer played so good for Vancouver today, man. The score would stay the same 3 minutes into the third. Can you guess who would take a penalty on Toronto? Can you guess? I'll give you a second. It was Renata Faust! It's what a game. It's gotta be what a game. Like, I don't know. Does she have a quota she's trying to meet? She is just in a puck battle. It squirts loose, and she just spends a little too long roughing up Sarah Nurse after the puck is gone, and she takes the penalty for it. And it's just, you gotta laugh. You gotta laugh. Because it's like, she's like, you could pencil her in for one bad penalty per game. It's so funny. Toronto manages to kill that one off. And Vancouver is really pouring it on here in the third because they've got ground to make up. They've only got 20 minutes to get 2 more goals, at least. And I said at the top of the video that Vancouver was kind of being kept to the outside by Toronto. And that is true. But when Vancouver was able to get into the middle of the ice, when they were able to break away from just being stuck on the perimeter, their high danger chances were way more threatening than anything Toronto got going. Kirk was coming up with some really big saves and some really tough saves, and finally, around the 9-minute mark, Hannah Miller picks one up behind the net, throws it out front to Izzy Daniel, who's parked in the middle of the circle, and she just blows one by Kirk. Absolutely no chance for Kirk on this one. Like, there were like 4 people in front of her. She couldn't see anything. They actually reviewed it for goalie interference because Vancouver players were in so tight and crowding around the net so much to completely take Kirk's eyes away, and she just had absolutely no opportunity to save this one. Great shot by Daniel, great pass by Miller. Vancouver put the pedal through the floor for the rest of the period. They had 11 minutes to at least tie it, and Kirk made some incredible saves. Vancouver got 26 shots this game, but they must have had 50 attempts at least. Toronto was blocking everything. Kirk even made mention of it in a little post-game interview on the ice where she's like, yeah, the girls were getting in front of all kinds of stuff tonight. The defense that was played by Toronto, by and large, was so good today. And for a zone of the ice that they've struggled in so much this season, that they've let so many opportunities go through uncontested, to see them be putting their body in front of as many pucks as they were, a breath of fresh air, to say the least. It was so nice. I want to give this shout out to Vancouver fans here. There was like 3-ish minutes left in the period, and I think they had just pulled Mashmeyer or were about to pull Mashmeyer. There was an offside call that absolutely was not offside. Sarah Nurse held the puck on the line. It was on the blue paint, and her stick might have come out the other side, but I don't know if that puck was touching any white ice at all, much less going completely over, and the linesperson put their arm up to call it offside, and it was delayed because it wasn't, so the Vancouver players were kind of coming out, but they weren't synchronized coming out and in all the way, so they eventually got it for the delay offside, and the face-off came all the way back into Vancouver's zone. They had a handful more chances. They were able to set up and get possession and get some shots off in the last 2-ish minutes of the game. But yeah, that was completely bogus. I feel for you, Vancouver fans. That call should not have happened, and to have the punishment come all the way back to your end was egregious. I do not know how they managed that. But after a couple more big saves from Kirk, Toronto comes out 2-1. It was a good game from them all around. It was especially, for playing 2 games in 3 days on the road against 2 teams that killed them last time. It was the first time this season that I've seen either the players or the coach publicly say, this part of our game isn't good enough. And the very next game, there are noticeable, obvious improvements in that area. It was really nice. It seems like they've all bought in, and they're all saying, anything we need to do, we're going to do 100%. There's no half measures. But it was a good game. Just all around. If Toronto plays like this for the rest of the season, I think they have a legitimate chance to get back into a playoff spot. I think they still need to work on the scoring goals part. Toronto's next game is back at home, finally, on Tuesday against Montreal, the now first place Montreal Victoire. The games against Montreal this season have actually been pretty close for Toronto, and they've strung 2 wins together, and I think they have a bit of a play style figured out that will give them more opportunities. They still have yet to score more than, I think, 3 goals on a goalie, 3 or 4. They need to put more pucks in the net. Just plain and simple, they do. But if they keep playing well, they're going to get their bounces, and they're going to be able to make a push. Let's hope they do. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want more. Ball is rolling.